So Mummy, which is the fifth feature by Xavier Dolan, who is a French-Canadian director who is in his mid-20s, which is he's made 5 feature films. It's absolutely astonishing. And I have to say, I haven't liked all of them by any means, but this is an impressive piece of work, histrionic and yet heartfelt. It is essentially a story about 3 characters. One of them is a mother played by Anne Dorval, who is attempting to hold her life together financially. She has been bereaved. She's lost her husband. She has a teenage son, brilliantly played by Antoine-Olivier or Pion perhaps, who is this hyperactive and very sort of behaviourally aggressive character. At the beginning of the film, is effectively excluded from all education because he set fire to a cafeteria. And she now has to look after him. She also has to hold down a job, and she has to deal with this sort of explosive force of nature in her life. Peculiarly, as a result of this, she ends up befriending a sort of a very reclusive neighbour played by Suzanne Clément, who has teaching skills but has retired from teaching because effectively she's had a breakdown from doing teaching. And these 3 people form an unexpectedly positive family unit in the face of sort of raging chaos. Now, the thing about the film is it's very, the emotions that it has are very raw. It's very much about people in confined spaces, sometimes behaving appallingly to each other. As I said, this central character, Steve, who's, he can be destructive and loudmouth and obnoxious, and yet also there is something sweet and tender, if uncontrolled, and dangerous about him. And for most of the movie, the film is framed in a 5:4 ratio, which is almost square. If you think of the old Academy ratio, which is 4:3, what we think of as the old sort of square frames, slightly oblong. 5:4 is, I suppose, best described as being like a camera phone ratio. And if you take a photograph of somebody on a camera phone, that's what the image would look like. And it's very boxy. So consequently, you kind of feel this claustrophobia. You feel that the environment is physically pushing in around you. And as you start to watch the film, you think this is going to be hard. This is going to be difficult to watch the film in this ratio. It feels really, really claustrophobic. And then as the drama moves on and as the characters start to develop these unexpected relationships, still with all this kind of chaos and pain and anguish, and as I said, very, very raw and very aggressive emotions are on display, there is a moment of release. There is a moment in which they seem, at least temporarily, to have escaped their surroundings. And there's a just lovely shot with the Kika guy, Steve, is on his skateboard, and he literally pulls the frame apart. He reaches out and he pushes the edges of the frame apart, and the screen opens up, and you feel the film breathing. You feel it. You suddenly feel the space. You suddenly feel the this openness. Now, for the rest of the film, it then vacillates between being in that 5:4 ratio and being in the more open ratio. It's using the framing of it to effectively mirror where the characters are emotionally, financially, physically, and to give you a sense of the claustrophobia from which they are suffering, but also the expansive possibilities of life. And I was thinking of, you saw Life of Pi, didn't you? Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things about Life of Pi is that the shape of the frame of that film changed all the way through the movie, but I don't think people didn't necessarily notice it. I mean, one of the reasons they did it was so that when they did the 3D, when the fish were jumping out over the boat, they actually appeared to be coming out of the screen. You think about a film like Grand Budapest Hotel, in which each particular time frame is done in a different screen ratio in order to emphasize the period that we're in. So all the time that you're watching the film, the shape of the screen is changing. In this particular case, what I thought at the beginning was going to be a gimmick, was going to be something that seemed too formal, that seemed too oppressive, that seemed almost like it was going to overpower the whole movie. I got used to very quickly. And then when this moment comes, when he literally physically pulls the screen apart, you do get this sense of the widening of the horizon, the widening of the scope, the widening of the perspective. Terrific performances from the 3 central players, completely committed. You absolutely believe in them. There's a rather bombastic mixtape soundtrack going on with Dido and Celine Dion and Oasis, which occasionally kind of, there's nothing about the soundtrack which is subtle, I have to say, but the emotions on display are very raw, and the film captures that really well. And actually, through all the pain and the heartache and the tragedy which is going on in the story, and this actually to some extent relates to that previous email about Still Alice, what's important is that the film seems to be made by somebody who feels sympathetic towards the characters and also believes that they have hope even when their situation appears hopeless. The film is called Mummy, directed by Xavier Dolan.